Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Alex Lowe, who played Simon, the Eco Warrior. Alex, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks for asking me, Neil.
Oh, not at all, not at all. What we'll do, Alex, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode, and if you could tell us how you first got into acting.
Yes, well, there's a couple of interesting things here which do include Grange Hill, actually.
Right, okay.
I was a child actor. I started about the age of 12. I was in a touring show of Macbeth that came to us in northwest London. And I played Macduff's son, who has the famous line in Shakespeare, "Mother, he has killed me," which always got lots of laughs from any school children who came in, along with the fact they could see up my sort of rough tunic that I was wearing to my pants when I was dead on the stage. So I did that, and I did a show for Thames Television called Theatre Box, we played a lot of very ghastly Victorian twee kids. One Christmas. I was really hats off to my parents, who are not remotely theatrical types. Right. But when I was about 11, I kind of thought, what do I want to do? I really want to be an actor. And really, I've never wanted to do anything else since. Right. Yeah. And that's the only thing I've ever had to do. And I've said this before, and it sounds very grand in other interviews, but for podcasts and stuff, that I've spent my entire life looking over my shoulder thinking at any moment I'm going to have to stop doing this.
Right, yeah.
And knuckle down and get a proper job. But the great thing is at 57, that is it, because no one else is going to employ me to do anything. So it's kind of a relief. I mean, if I wanted to get out of it, I couldn't anyway. I was very keen, and I was a kind of child actor, and my brother and I used to do a lot of cabaret, and in 1979 we came runners-up in the Walls Cornetto Junior Talent Contest.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so it was me doing my impressions, and my brother was my straight man, and then and all the jokes were from the Two Ronnies joke book.
Right, okay.
And then I would play the keyboards, and he was a drummer, and we sort of entered this competition, and it was kind of thrilling to do it. And we were pipped at the post by a girl who was doing McCavity Cat from Cats. Yeah. Which, even now, how she won it, just because she wore a leotard and sort of 11 years old, people thinking, that's so dramatic. I was thinking, what a load of bollocks. What about us? So we're playing the piano, drums, impressions, jokes. How did we come runner-up to her?
I mean, it's good to see that you're over it, to be honest.
I'm not remotely. So, so we were very, it was always a thing, sort of performing. I think that came from my dad's side of the family, who were kind of cheerful Cockney chumpies. I know I sound very posh nowadays, but they're all from kind of southeast London, and then in the war moved to northwest London because it was a move to get people away from the Blitz and all that. So I was always surrounded by these cheerful Cockney chumpies who were all about roll out the barrel and playing the piano in the pub. And my uncle used to do a kind of mind reading act, and my dad played the sax. So they were not really theatrical types, but performing was not seen as a kind of completely outlandish thing to do. There's a very long answer.
But so were you at like stage school or anything like that?
No, I wasn't. I went to normal comprehensive school in the London suburbs, and after school, this is a really amazing thing, really. I went to a very serious after-school drama school. Right. So it wasn't a drama club. It wasn't a load of kids just being allowed to go and, get away from the parents and give the parents a break. It was run by two women who were drama teachers at the Guildhall in London.
Right. Yeah.
And they were properly, it was properly an actor's training. And you know what it's like from about the age of, you start doing that at 11, and somehow I carried on through my teenage years and my cynicism and all that till about 18. And you sort of as a kid, you just absorb things like a sponge. So it didn't feel like having this great education in being an actor.
Yeah.
It was just like going there and improvising and reading poetry. I mean, it sounds very poncy, but I was kind of into it.
Yeah.
And acting and being in. A lot of kids do that. I'm sure they do even now. Duologue exams and monologue exams for drama,
Yeah.
and used to do a lot of that. And then I became involved with a kids theatrical agency, which was adjoined to this drama
Right.
school in Pinner in northwest London. And I did a couple of things through there and did some professional work from, about the age of 12, 13, 14. I was in Another Country, which became the film. I was in that with Kenneth Branagh and Rupert Everett and sort of, so God, I'll stop talking in a minute. That was it. I sort of did a lot of stuff as a boy, which is great. But of course, it doesn't mean there's any guarantee.
No, but like
when you're an adult.
You've just mentioned Theatre Box there. Now, when I've been researching you for this, so you were in that with Roger Sloman and Mark Farmer, and they were both in Grange Hill. So there's like you mentioned your Grange Hill links there.
Yeah.
But you, round about that same time, you mentioned something to me the other week, a big Grange Hill link, and I think this will come as a bit of a shock to some of most of the listeners, to be honest.
Okay, so this is it. This theatrical agent, this woman who I was assigned to, phoned up and said it's an audition for Grange Hill. This must have been about, I'd say 1980, 81, something like that. And it was to go in and meet the director on that. And I was up for the part of Jonah. Remember Jonah?
Yeah.
And he had that croaky voice. Who was that? Who played Jonah?
So Lee Spark played Jonah.
What's he doing now?
So Lee lives in Australia. He moved over there a while back, went over there traveling and never moved back. Basically, he's loving life over there. Lee was actually the second ever guest that I had on this, and you are guest 92, I think. so yeah, Lee Jonah was my favourite ever character in Grange.
Really?
By a mile, yeah.
Okay, well, Jonah and I went in with him pretty much, and I think I don't know whether we had to do a scene together or something, but I was basically just too middle class.
Right.
He had all the edge, and I will never forget the director going, look, let's set up some sort of drama where you've been accused of something and you're arguing your case back. And I thought I was doing really well, but I had my hand in my pocket, and I always remember him going, now, can we just stop? I thought, oh God. He said, I don't know anyone who would have this argument or this defending himself with his hands in his pockets throughout. And I thought, oh dear, that's gone. And I thought I did all right, but I thought he's the guy who's going to get it. But just because he was a bit more street than me and I was a kind of swatty pants. Not that I was a kind of nerd, but I was not quite as Grange Hill as some of them.
I get you, yeah.
But I always remember being very late for that audition, and I just started at Noah Hill High School in northwest London. And one of the reasons we were late was, I don't know why it stuck into my head, when I went to the reception at Television Centre to go and do this audition, we ran in, really hot and sweaty, me and my mum, who had to take me to the audition. And she went up to the desk and was going, Noah Hill? And they said, sorry? Noah Hill. It's an audition for Noah Hill, which is my school. And I was sort of waiting around thinking, what's going on? They're going, I don't know what you're talking about, madam. They're going, Noah, he's here for Noah Hill. They were looking on the schedule. And in the end, they went, Grange Hill. Oh, yeah, sorry, Grange Hill. And so we were very late. The whole thing was, oh, God. I mean, the whole episode was pretty disappointing, really.
Right.
I was, of course, like you say, it was your favourite show at the time. I was desperate to be. You imagine the kudos at school, something like that.
Yeah.
But I just, I was beaten to it by that guy, and good luck to him.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So like you say, you were a child actor, you did a few other things. You did Mansfield Park, it was called, and you played the younger version of someone else who was played by Nicholas Farrell.
Yeah.
You played Edmund. Now, I've asked this a few times. When you're playing the younger version of someone, did you work with that actor and to see their mannerisms and things like that?
Yeah, not really. I mean, no, I didn't actually.
Right.
He doesn't look anything like me.
Right.
I grew, grew up into him. But that was a great thrill, sort of doing a big BBC drama.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about this only the other day. You think about the cuts at the BBC, and there was some talk about what did they do, Wolf Hall or something recently.
Right.
And the producer, executive producer, or the director, or someone was on telly going, "We actually had to cut scenes that were shot outside because we didn't have the budget." And everyone was going, "It can't be done." And he said, "So that's why if you watch Wolf Hall, there's so many scenes indoors. People were going, it's sort of confined because they couldn't afford to take it outside and have camera shots and all that."
Yeah.
And I think people took wage cuts. And if I've got this right, the director or the producer put their own money in to finish off the
Wow.
editing and this kind of mad stuff.
Yeah.
And I just remember doing this, Mansfield Park in 1983 and seeing the level of detail I couldn't believe. I remember there was a guy who was an extra who was it was a gardener in this sort of stately home. I remember the hair and makeup, carefully painting in his teeth being slightly,
Yeah.
diseased. And now this was guy who's miles away in
Yeah.
the background tilling some soil. You
Yeah.
could not see his teeth. And I just thought, I can almost guarantee that level of detail doesn't happen now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was kind of a great thing doing that. And another credit for when I was
Yeah.
about 15. That was, yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Oh, I mean, I'm not going to talk about everything you've done because you've done
Right.
so much, but you were in something quite, I need to mention this one, Dutch Girls.
Brief, very briefly.
But I mean, did you get to work with any of the big names who were in that? Because when I looked at that, there was, they might not have been big names at the time, but
Yeah.
like Colin Firth and Timothy Sport, Colin McFarlane, who I'm sure you probably worked with since. But did you get to work with any of that? I know you were only credited as Boy with Bell.
Boy with Bell. Yeah, God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I know what happened was that was another thing. I went up for that audition, and I think I looked too young.
Right.
It was a woman who was really instrumental in my career at that time, called Sue Birtwistle, who was married to Richard Eyre, who's the head of the National Theatre, and she got me in for all sorts of things, and that was one of them. But
Right.
all really great stuff. That was for LWT, and it was a big sort of drama, one-off drama.
All right.
And I think they met me and went, "You just look too young." So. And of course, all that, like Colin Firth and all these people were 5 years older than me, playing younger. And I was the actual age I was supposed to be when I was very young.
Right. Okay. Now, you mentioned Kenneth Branagh before, because I remember this being a huge deal at the time when Peter's Friends came out. I mean, because if you think about, in the early 80s, you had, the Rick Mayall, Edmondson group, you had all them. But this was, the next sort of one, I think, with, Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson, Fry and Laurie, Imelda Staunton, and stuff like that. Did it feel like a big deal at the time?
I've got to tell you, Neil, it was the biggest and one of the biggest things in my life. We've done some Shakespeare for Radio 3, and Ken Branagh just said to me, who I knew, of course, from the Renaissance day, from the Another Country days.
Yeah.
And he just said to me, "Look, we've got this film we're making. There might be a part for you. Are you interested?" I went, let me think. Yeah, I am. And he said, "Well, I would need someone to be my stand-in." So I was Kenneth Branagh, and I'd done a bit of standing in on Uncle Vanya, which we did a tour of this Chekhov play. And he said, basically, you could play my part. When I'm directing, I would, do the light readings and rehearse with other actors so Ken could watch it on a monitor and watch it through the camera lens and all that. And I did that for Peter's Friends and also for Much Ado About Nothing in 1992. But yeah, I mean, when I got this gig playing this character Paul in Peter's Friends, who famously had sex with Emma Thompson's character, what used to happen was there was a guy, apart from anything, you have people pick you up for work in the morning in a lovely big Mercedes. And I was living in northeast London in Leytonstone, and this car used to pull up. I was the first one to be picked up as the junior member of the cast. And then we would drive round to Hugh Laurie's house in Tufnell Park. These were heroes of mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Heroes of mine. And then finally we'd pick up Stephen Fry as the senior guy who was allowed to be the last picked up in Gibson Square in Islington. And these guys would sit in the back and I would be sitting in the front thinking, life doesn't get any better. You know, apart from anything, I had this part, this character Paul. It was only a small part, but it's a nice part, memorable part.
Yeah.
But playing Kenneth Branagh stand-in just meant that I was there for the whole shoot.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, and getting paid to be there for the whole shoot and knocking around with my big pal there was Tony Slattery, who's sadly no longer with us. But, you know, we used to knock around together and have a good old laugh. And it was just the greatest thing in my life. I mean, I can't tell you. It was so fantastic because there's little enough British film industry anyway. And so if someone can put together a British film and I didn't even have to audition. They just, you know, be in it. And to be there for the whole shoot and to go and have, I know this sounds really silly, but there's breakfast provided. There's a nice lunch provided.
Yeah.
There's a car to and from work. There's always some gossip. You're listening to anecdotes from Stephen Fry all day.
Yeah.
It's just a privilege to do that. I'd have paid to have done it.
Yeah.
So that was really great. And then that summer we did Much Ado About Nothing as well.
Which is another like stellar cast there because it opened because like Denzel Washington's in it, Brian Blessed, you know, Michael Keaton.
I know I lived with Brian Blessed in a villa at that time.
Wow.
And for the whole thing. And how do you think that would be? How do you imagine it was exactly as it was? This big booming bloody voice the whole time. Yeah. Endless anecdotes. And if you got stuck with him in the kitchen, and I'm sure that's still the case now, you get stuck with a bloke, you will be there for 2 hours while he's talking. And I've heard these anecdotes. I've since worked with him since then.
Yeah.
And I heard the same anecdotes word for word, you know.
Yeah.
But it was really, really a great time in my life. I can't fault it.
I mean, and I know these people are your contemporaries and colleagues, but do you get starstruck?
Very much so. Right. Very much so. And I mean, there are two things. There's certain people I'm very starstruck and I go to pieces. To be honest with you, I'm a bit like that with Kenneth Branagh. I don't know whether I haven't seen him for a while, but I absolutely felt like he held the keys to my entire career.
Right.
Because he put me in his theatre company. He put me in, Peter's Friends. He put me in Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah.
I stood in for Sir John Gielgud and another short film that Kenneth Branagh did.
Yeah.
And it was suddenly like, I've got everything to thank this guy for.
Yeah.
And this is another strange thing, but I don't know about you, but my parents, as I say, were kind of lower middle class people who went to work at 9 o'clock, came back at 5. This was so outlandish, this stuff, which is, as I said, you know, it's the guilt I feel about doing it. And they were very much like, you know, you go to work, you get your head down, don't bother anyone, don't get anyone's nerves because you don't want to be sent home. And I sort of think, now I'm a grown man, that's not always the way to go. You want to make a bit of an impression. You want to show a little bit of personality. But I think with the likes of Branagh and, you know, when I went to Italy and there are American stars there and Emma Thompson, these people, I wouldn't have said boo to a goose.
Yeah.
I was so, you know, just mind your P's and Q's. And other British actors were as well. It was like, this is such a rarity to do this.
Yeah.
And yet the other people like Kate Beckinsale, it was so rude and sort of confident. And and Robert Sean Leonard, who was in Italy, you know, I remember him. He was like a year younger than me.
Right.
And he was so bloody quick and funny and smart. And try as I might, I just remember being very starstruck and sort of daren't open my mouth for fear of being an idiot or saying something stupid or... You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully, I'm not as bad as that, but I can go a bit like that even now.
Brilliant. Okay, so I need to talk to you about something you were in. Now, this is one of my favourite programmes ever. And I know you've done a lot of sketch shows but this is my favorite sketch show ever, and it's the Fast Show, because you were in one scene that I know of in the Fast Show. You were a customer in the Suits You sketch, and I actually watched it. It was on telly the other week. Now, you're in that scene with Paul Whitehouse, Mark Williams, and Carolina Hare. Now, they're right from the off there, it's like, how funny is it? You know it's going to be hilarious, but is it hard not to corpse when you're filming that stuff like that?
It really was. I mean, I remember what happened was I was feeling, God, I did spend a lot of my early careers feeling bitter about things that didn't quite happen. But we had just done a TV pilot, a comedy short I'd done with Angela Clark, who is Margie Clark's sister. And we'd done this thing called The Honeymoon's Over, and it was a pilot for a sitcom written by Charlie Higson and Paul Whitehouse.
Right.
And it was pretty funny, and I thought, oh my God, they I got this audition, I got the thing, and I thought, this is going to be a great show. And Vic Reeves was in that, playing his character, what's his name, Colin Bell or something Bell.
Right.
And so suddenly nothing happened with that. I was waiting to hear, that. And so I think as a sort of to cheer me up, they said, do you want to come and play a character in the Fast Show?
Right.
This one sketch. So I was not quite as pleased about it as I could have been. I thought we were going to do this sitcom, but clearly they jettisoned that in order to do the Fast Show.
Right.
But I remember thinking, God, these sketches are funny. I thought they were so ingenious.
Yeah.
And, that used to make me laugh. That made me laugh enormously because it's quite sort of nebulous, that. I don't know what that sketch is about because they're not really perverts. They're not really gay men. They're not that perverts and gay men are the same thing.
No.
They're not really perverts, or gay men.
Right.
But there's something really odd about those guys and those sort of tailors, that kind of terrible sort of subservience. And it's just a great idea, isn't it? Two slightly weird people.
Yeah.
So that used to make me laugh my head off, and in rehearsals and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, did you know that Paul Whitehouse originally wanted to do that for Harry Enfield, and Harry Enfield didn't want to know? Harry Enfield said I watched the documentary. He said he just didn't get it. He said it's not there, and then he said I just don't get what it is. And then they did it on the Fast Show, and Harry Enfield couldn't believe how funny it actually was. Like,
it's so funny. It's so odd and such a nicely observed thing,
I mean, because I was wondering why you were only in like sort of the one sketch, because they did, they were a team of 6 or 7, but they did keep.
I'll tell you why.
Go on.
2 words: Rhys Thomas.
Right, I was genuinely going to mention him then.
Yeah, so he's a great mate of mine, and we did Fun at the Funeral Parlour together. He's a great guy. I love him so much, and I think he started as a runner at the BBC, and typical of Rhys, because he is charming and he is someone who won't hold back and doesn't kind of doff his cap and keep quiet. He's got a natural kind of lovely charm about him, and I think they sort of fell in love with him, and he started doing the stuff that I could have done, I reckon, although I'm a lot older than him. And then his career's gone from strength to strength. Mine hasn't. No, he's been brilliant. So brilliant. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Okay. So we will move on to Grange Hill. And you were in Grange Hill in 1995. It was on, so I imagine you were filming it the year before, 94. Right. And you played Simon, who was a member of the Taino tribe. It was series 18, and it was all centered around Julie Corrigan, played by Margot Selby. She'd become like this. She'd become a bit of an eco-warrior herself, and had been invited to join the Taino tribe by a woman called Roz. Yes. And they were living in a house. Well, they were squatting in this house. It was going to be demolished to make way for a new road. And when Julie first went to the house, the first person she met was Simon.
Right.
Carrying a bag of sand or cement or something. There was always someone carrying something like that around. And I think Simon was meant to be like second in command of this whole place, like with Roz being in charge. And he explained to Julie that, I love this, that while some of the tribe lived in tents, the rest of them just sort of slept where they landed, basically.
Yeah.
And it was in case if they did come to knock it down, they could say, look, there's people in there, like, you know, and they were expecting someone to come and try and evict them around that time. It was a very different story for Grange Hill because, you know, like everyone talks about like the drugs and the bullying and the racism and all that. But it was very different because this was like around the time of like Swampy and, things like that. So I thought it was good the way that Grange Hill picked up on this thing. And with Julie being a sixth former, you know, it is around that age where kids start forming their own sort of like political ideas and things like that.
Well, I think it was probably at the time, and maybe people would say it happens increasingly now, where every week it was an issue.
Yeah.
We don't like racism.
Yeah.
We don't like school uniform. We think that, you know, pollution is really bad. And this was kind of part of that.
Yeah.
I used to love the old days of protests with Danny Kendler when he would be a sort of, which just to go back, you know, I used to love that idea because we all knew people at school who were a little bit radical.
Yeah.
Who, you know, I hope kids are still like that. My wife's a school teacher. She said there are people who are like that. And you see a spark in them where most kids are just kind of about football and getting off with girls or whatever. There's always someone who's, you know, a little bit radical. So this was the 90s version of that.
Yeah.
First of all, can I just say, so that's 30 years ago.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, 30 years ago.
I can't believe that is 30 years ago. Seriously.
Seriously,
I cannot believe that. If you'd have said it was about 2005, 20 years ago, I would have believed it. It really is incredible. I can't believe that. So it was with my friend Candida Gubbins, who was my girlfriend in it. Or I don't know if she was a girlfriend, but she was also an eco warrior who I knew. And we just had a great time sort of working together on that. And I remember Francesca Martinez, she was in that episode as well.
Yeah.
But I just think it was one of those, you're right. I don't think I've seen anything like that since, particularly. No. But it was, as I say, it was that time when it was all issue based.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, there are cleverer ways of doing it than just battering people over the head with a message about eco. But it was good. It was good fun to do, and it was a proper kids drama. That was a case of something that was really carefully crafted, and I don't know whether that still exists now as kids drama. I really hope it does.
Yeah, I mean, what I liked about it is it showed the types of things that people who were really passionate about about the environment, the types of things that they would do, because they showed things like in the house. I don't know if you remember this scene. They showed Simon took Julie into the kitchen and there was something on the floor that he said that they could chain themselves into.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you remember?
Was it a washing machine?
It was a washing machine. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, pretty good stuff, really. Yeah. I think that's good. I don't know whether you'd be allowed to have that on telly now. I mean, seen as wokeism or something.
Yeah, like it's a good scene because it shows that what they would do. You know, the fact that they've converted this washing machine. There's holes for their hands to go in.
Yeah.
And then he locks them both in.
That's right.
Or he locked Julian, and then he did that classic joke of walking away and leaving her locked in until she said, you know, what are you doing, Simon? Let me out.
Yes. Yes.
Now, Julie then says to him, well, what's the point of this? And it's when Simon explains, well, look, to those people, the contractors, time is money, and it will delay them by a couple of hours and all that. But because he was saying, like, if they couldn't convince the contractors that they were wrong, they would make it so expensive because time is money that they would then have to think about it. Yeah. What I want to ask you is, whenever I'm putting an episode of the podcast out, I put picture clues online for people to try and guess who the guest is going to be. And whoever guesses first gets to ask the next question.
Okay.
So in the last episode, a guy called Charles. Charles is a massive Grange Hill fan. He's a big supporter of the podcast.
Yeah.
Well, he guessed that the last guest was going to be Tracy Murphy, who played Claire. And he's got a question for you. And the question is, when you were filming those scenes in the house, because we saw the exterior of the house was on a street,
Yeah.
Was the interior, was that filmed in the house or was that in the studio?
Oh, that is a difficult question. That is a difficult question. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. Um, I've got a funny feeling it must have been a studio.
Right.
I can't, because, I've been in places where you're hanging around and there's nowhere to sit in a house and there's equipment everywhere. And I
Yeah.
don't remember that.
Right. Okay.
I don't remember. I would say that was in the studio, that interior.
Right.
But I do remember being outside in a particularly cold, miserable sort of car park type
Right.
place.
Well, speaking of being outside, we saw
Yeah.
a scene where the tribe were cooking toast on a fire.
Yeah.
And it was an open fire and they had sticks with the bread on the end. Now, as someone who's been in scouts pretty much all my life,
Yes.
I would like to suggest that just a grill would have been better over the fire than trying to cook with sticks over it. And
yeah,
while they were all big for the environment,
yeah,
this house that they were staying in, that they were squatting in, it had electricity, it had
yeah,
phones, it had the fax machine, it had the telly. That's
yeah.
quite a carbon footprint they're leaving behind there as well.
Yeah.
And then there was loads of things they would show, like they would plan what they would do if the contractors came, and then we then see them all fortifying the house
Yes.
for to try and prevent the demolition. They had all the holes in the wall that they put their arms through.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then the contractors came and started demolishing the house with the tribe inside. And they were singing, but you looked as though you were just about moving your mouth when they were singing. They were singing this song about them being the tribe and what they were there for and stuff.
But you suggesting I didn't bother learning the words?
You weren't giving it much gusto. I'll be honest. Like I don't think Kenneth Branagh would have imagined it.
Maybe I thought I was too cool for school playing Simon.
And we then found out that Julie had chipped a bone when the police were trying to cut her handcuffs off.
Right.
But we never found out what happened to Simon or indeed the rest of the tribe.
No.
What do you think happened to Simon?
I would imagine that he was up at the magistrate's court.
Right.
He probably had some sort of fine, maybe had to do some community service.
Okay.
And then as a result became quite a sort of caring, community-based guy. Brilliant. Who helped some kids. And then maybe he took some degree in law and did something for Citizens Advice. Right. Quite a nice kind of bloke. Maybe the kind of bloke we need more of in this society.
Brilliant.
I mean, although if he's my age now, 57, he's probably driving around a big Volvo, speculating on the money markets, everything that's a problem in this society.
He wouldn't have gone and done something like The Good Life. Like
I say that I've got a mate who was an eco warrior, and hats off to him, my mate Alex.
Yeah,
he still lives that life very much so. And I would have at the time put it down to some kind of mad, trendy, lefty champagne socialism, we used to call it.
Yeah.
I think, but he's good as his word, and he's absolutely lived a life of that. So some people do. Yeah. Let's not be too cynical.
Yeah, no. Okay, so that was the last that you were in, Grange Hill. I say you were only in 3 episodes. You are, I think, you are officially the guest I've had on who's appeared in the fewest number of episodes.
Oh, well, I'm glad to be here.
I did have David Lynch was on, who played Booger Benson in the Tucker years. He's been on. He was 4 episodes, I think, but you've now taken that record from him.
Okay.
So, like I say, I'm not going to talk about everything. There's just a few bits that I do want to talk about. So I want to talk about a few years later, you were in that Peter Kay thing.
Yes.
And it was the Bingo Hall episode. And you played Sparky.
Yes.
Can you remember why your character was called Sparky?
Oh, that's a good question. That is a very good question. Is it something he electrocuted himself or something?
he was struck by lightning.
Oh, that's it. So Peter came to see me. Peter Kay came to see me doing a show at the Edinburgh Festival.
Right.
As I said to you, the sort of I wasn't from Down Pit, but it wasn't easy. I've always had to kind of graft to earn some money. My parents didn't have tons of money to just support me. So I've always had in the back of my mind, what am I going to do to sustain this career? So I went to Edinburgh Festival in 1998 when I turned 30, which is nowadays quite a prohibitively expensive thing to do. But then you sort of could.
Right.
And Peter came to see me with Pat Roach, bomber Pat Roach from Outfit Pet, and they were reviewing it for Edinburgh Nights for BBC Two. And my show was about British wrestling, where I played Giant Haystacks, Big Daddy, and all that sort of stuff. Jackie Pallo, and Peter came. We sort of hit it off. We knocked around a bit together at Edinburgh. This is before anyone knew him. He was just about kind of making waves. And then he sold a huge amount of tickets, did a gig at Edinburgh, and then he phoned me up. I was doing a show, like a Shakespeare, open air Shakespeare thing at Stafford Castle, not Stratford, Stafford. And Peter said, "You want to come and play this part in this thing for that Peter Kay thing?" Which was great, an absolute thrill, which I managed to film during the day and get back to do this show.
All right, well,
And that's sort of how I hooked up with Peter. And then, of course, he put me in Phoenix Nights.
No, the thing with Phoenix Nights is, I know, obviously, Phoenix Nights came from that Peter Kay thing. But that Bingo Hall one could easily, that could easily have had a series behind it as well when you look at the characters there. I know you have to think about the situations and stuff like that. But I love Eyes Down because it was, I just thought it was so good. Now there's a scene in that with you, Peter Kay and Sean Gibson, and you're talking about Keith Lard.
Yes.
And you were laughing, right?
Yes.
Was it genuine? It looks like genuine laughing. Like
I can assure you, Neil, it was not genuine laughter.
It's okay.
I had really had enough by the end. By about the fifth take, my ears, sort of the glands behind your ears, if you laugh too much, start to hurt. It was like that.
Right.
And so they'd go, cut. So, I mean, I can do it now. Laughing. It was, I think after a while, maybe you start laughing. It turns into a sense of hysteria because it's getting so exhausting. But I mean, it was not real laughter.
Right, okay.
I really had enough by the end of it.
Okay, and like you've said there, we need to talk about Phoenix Nights because without being honest, that's the sort of the thing that I would say you are probably most remembered.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed by that. I'll be honest, Neil, because I
understand
I was in it for 3 bloody minutes.
Right.
And it is embarrassing. And there's, for example, Justin Morehouse, who I occasionally meet on the comedy circuit, always says to me, "Yeah, you're not in it for 2 minutes. I'm still wringing out the last few pence of this." So it is sort of embarrassing that is what I'm known for. But I like to think I've picked up the character because I now tour as Clinton Baptiste, and that hats off to Peter. He's let me do it as a live thing.
Right. So it wasn't your character. It was
no.
Oh, right. Wow.
Neil Fitzmaurice wrote it with Peter and Dave Spikey. Neil, I think, came up with the name just because it's a kind of slightly exotic showbiz name. And so Peter just said, he phoned me up one day and said, "Have I got a part for you?" Which was this Clinton Baptiste. And so we came along. I've got a videotape somewhere of us sort of rehearsing it, and I like to think developing it in rehearsal. But the key catchphrase is not mine; that's Peter's.
Right. But did you have any idea that line would become one of the quoted lines from that program?
I did not, and I'm delighted to have that. I mean, I have to say, it is a horrible catchphrase.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if you call someone that word, it is the lowest. You don't get any lower than that.
No.
But it has a lot of punch to it. I'm always asked. I do cameos and memos, and where you do these dedications. And I'm always being asked to use that word to describe someone, and 9 times out of 10, I'm sure it's all taken in good jest, but I don't know. Sometimes I'm calling people that name and thinking this is not me who's asked. I'll do it because people think, I'm assuming it's a joke.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm really grateful that I'm allowed to do that character now. I'm about to do my 5th UK tour, so It's still going strong. Yeah, I'm delighted.
Brilliant. And you've been in so many British comedy programs. I was telling someone the other day that I was interviewing you, and they were like, "Who's that?" And I started listing things, and they were like, when I say Clinton Baptiste, they go, "Oh yeah, I know you mean." Because to me, and this is no disrespect to you or the guy I'm about to mention, if you think of someone like Paul Giamatti, the actor, who's in loads of stuff, but hardly anyone knows his name. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people will recognize you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't mean that to be disrespectful in any way. Like,
I honestly, I mean that is a strange thing because I'm very happy to just keep working and it's great. I mean, to be fair, I have tapped up for one episode here and there on things, so I don't expect people to be following me that avidly. But I mean, part of me is a bit gutted that no one seems to know me, but I'm, it's fine. It means that you don't get on their nerves. You can just kind of go undercover. But I think it's partly because, just we've established, I spread myself so thin. I've done classical acting and I've been a presenter. I had my own show on XFM at one time. I've done bits on, characters. I used to do voices on what's his name? Christian O'Connell's show.
Yeah.
I've done, TV dramas, straight dramas, comedy, do stand up, do character comedy. I've written for kids shows. I've done long running Claire and the Community I did for Radio 4, which ran for about 15 years. So I think that just because I've had to provide for my family and all that stuff, I think that the secret is you specialize in something.
Yeah.
And I don't. I just kind of spread myself very thin. And I think I was a bit stupid, really. I sort of naively thought that that's what you do. You're as kind of catch-all who can play all these different things. And actually, if you have your branding is the thing very much in the modern age.
Yeah.
This is what I do, and that's what you're known for, and that's what you get cast as.
Yeah.
But I've just spread myself all over the place. A little bit of this, bit of writing for people, and only because I just wanted to keep money coming in. But it's nice now to have my two major characters, Barry from Watford and Clinton Baptiste. I'm doing those pretty exclusively.
Barry from Watford, right?
Yes.
So I don't know people listening to this. I assume a lot of people know about one of the most famous phone calls ever.
Yes.
Did Ian Lee know about that?
Yeah, he knew it was me because we'd done loads of stuff together on LBC and Absolute Radio and Talk Radio. And I knew he was doing a show depping for someone at BBC Midlands. What was it? BBC West Midlands Radio. And honestly, I'd just gone to watch my son training football on a Saturday. I thought, I must phone Ian and do Barry. And so I just made this thing up, but it just went so viral. I mean, it's always going viral.
Yeah, well, it did the other day.
I saw that. Yeah, it's gone off again. And so it's basically, Barry, this is an old Cockney bloke based on my own forebears from southeast London. And the interview was about blue badge holders and how people exploit the blue badge to go and do their shopping. So I had Barry phoning up and he's going, there's a particular biscuit you can only get. And I'd used my wife's badge to go and get the biscuit because you can't park outside the supermarket. And honestly, it just took off so much. But Ian and I both say that's not the funniest one we've ever done. We couldn't believe that was the one. So thanks for noticing that one.
No, the minty biscuit. If people listening have never heard Barry from Watford talk about the minty biscuit, you need to go and find it online because it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And you've played Barry from Watford. You were in that Noel Edmonds thing. Cheap.
Yeah. That was upsetting. That came and went 30 episodes, 31-hour episodes for Channel 4, and nobody saw it. I can't believe it. I was on Channel 4 about 3:30 in the afternoon, but it was on during the summer and no one saw it.
Right.
Because the mums weren't picking up kids, students weren't around. And when it started off, it was pretty terrible. But I guarantee if we'd kept going, it would have been a massive hit.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I noticed you were in May Today Hope.
Oh yeah,
playing someone called Barry. Was that Barry from Watford again, or was
no,
was that a different Barry?
Just by chance. Yeah, that was great. That's by Stephen Cook wrote that. Jason Cook wrote that, yes. Who is a brilliant stand-up comedian, and I met him up in Newcastle, and he just put me in that. So right. That was lovely.
No, I've seen comments online this week when I've been putting your pictures on. People are trying to guess who it is, and someone the other day had an inkling that it was going to be you.
Oh, okay.
And they said they hope we talked about Barry from Watford and so on, but I've never been able to say Bank Holiday Monday exactly the same since.
Bank Holiday Monday. That's right. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I noticed, I have to mention this, you've also part of the Whoniverse now, because you're Doctor Who, you're doing voices for the Doctor Who podcast.
Yes, I used to do loads for the podcast, and I also used to do bits for what are they called?
Is it Big Finish?
Yeah, Big Finish. Yeah. So I was in lots of Doctor Who things and spin-off Doctor Who things, but I think they've stopped asking me because I let on that I don't have any interest in science fiction, and they're all a bit into that stuff.
Right. So
not for me.
I love science fiction, but I've never really got into Doctor Who.
Really?
If I'm completely honest, yeah. And it's one of those things. All the elements are right for me to be a fan of it, and it's just one of those. It's just never got it. Now, one more thing I need to talk about. One classic kids TV program that you are also massively involved in. I don't know if people know this. Fireman Sam.
I still do it now. Unless, I may have been dropped for the next series, but I've done it for about 10 years. I don't know how long I've done it.
Brilliant.
And I play Joe, the inventor. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. What have we got here? And I play Ben, who's a kind of, enthusiastic, handsome helicopter pilot.
Yeah, right.
And I also play Professor Pickles, who speaks like Nicholas Parsons and does the whole thing like this. So, I've never really watched an episode of it, but I love it. I love doing it.
Right. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So, like I say, we could do so many. We could talk for hours about the stuff that you do, but we'll talk about what you're doing right sort of now.
Okay. Can I ask people to please, on the 11th of April, 2025, if you're listening to this, it's been and gone, but I've started a new podcast for TalkSport called Buckle Up with Barry, and it's Barry from Watford as if he's a cab driver outside TalkSport, picks people up and speaks to them about what they're doing. So there's interviews with Ali McCoist, Troy Deeney, Darren Bent, Shabana Hearn, Jason Cundy. Oh God, who else? Gab Ablongahor.
Yeah.
Matt Lucas appears. Right. Matt Berry appears, which is a real coup.
Yeah.
There's a couple more. I've got 2 more to do. I'm not sure who we're going to get. We're going to get some people. So it's funny. It's improvised, and I hope people go for it. I don't know. I really don't know who's going to be listening. Right. But I think they wanted a sort of comedy quote, and I go into TalkSport occasionally as Clinton. Right. I might have to go in and promote it as Barry.
Yeah.
I'm doing that. I've got a new Clinton Baptiste tour happening in 2026.
Yeah.
Called Spectral Intercourse, which I'm writing at the moment with my director and co-writer Brendan, which I think is going to be the best thing we've ever done. Brilliant. But we work a year in advance getting this thing together because you really want a chance to let it ferment. This sounds pretentious, but really think around the box. Don't be just sitting down writing jokes.
Yeah.
If you've got a blank canvas and you've got a year, we kind of talk quite generally. What would we like Clinton to be, examining? What's the drama behind it? What does he want?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about that, which is why I need him to do, because if it was me, I'd just be writing crude jokes.
Yeah. But is there much like crowd work when you're doing Clinton Baptiste?
There's a lot of crowd work. And I would say it's, some of it is improvised.
Right.
You've got to sort of have to do a
Yeah.
bit of improvisation, but it's my least favorite thing. I mean,
Right.
I would do it if I'm forced to, and the whole thing is written. It is
Yeah.
written, but you've got to have your. I mean, and I often say this to other comedians. I see brilliant stand-ups dealing with hecklers or
Yeah.
something that goes wrong or someone who's irritating the audience. And I take my hat off to them because
Yeah.
that is such a skill to do that and
Yeah.
to play someone off against the other, and it's just not me. I wish I could get better at it and I want to get better at it.
Uh-huh.
But I'm an actor. I'm not really a stand-up.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's of course there's a huge stand-up element to what I'm doing, but
Yeah.
it's playing this character. And so there's a lot of that. There is a lot of improvisation, but there's stuff that looks improvised, which really is not.
Hey, you must be doing it well. And
Yeah. There's a
but,
lot of pretense.
and do people expect you to say that catchphrase when you do it?
Yes,
Right.
they do, and I find different ways to fit it in.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I do the catchphrase. Don't worry, buy a ticket, you'll hear the catchphrase. Yeah.
And not is there a John in the room? You couldn't do that joke anymore. Is there a John in the room?
Why?
No one's called John anymore.
That's
it's all like, is there a Kyle in the room? Is there a Brody in the room? No offense to anyone called Kyle or Brody.
No, but that's right. Sometimes when I'm writing jokes and you want a sort of old lady's name and you want to put Irene or Rita or Ethel. No, they've got the same names as my generation because they're all getting much older. No one's called Irene. No contemporaries.
I mean, there are a lot of older names coming back in.
Yeah, that's true.
But like Eva and Ava and all those names. But
it is a funny position to be. But more generally, when you're writing comedy, I find now it's very difficult because not everyone is looking at the same stuff. In the old days, you would have some catch-all things. If you wanted to talk about, I don't know, sort of a very rich person, you would talk about, I don't know, this is a terrible example. I can't think of anything offhand, but if you wanted to talk about, say, a real Lothario men's sex symbol, you might say Sasha Distel.
Yeah.
Or you might say
Engelbert Humperdinck.
Yeah, but now the kids don't know that.
No.
People don't know. And there were just certain cultural milestones.
Yeah.
You might mention Ken Dodd. I mean, I don't know even these are just household names. They're part of the British fabric.
Yeah.
And yet people don't know it. I've often mentioned to young people about Vic and Bob. Like that's the most modern thing I can think of. No, what you're talking about. I've never heard of it.
I work in a school and I was talking to a couple of the teachers. This was a few years ago. I only about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were talking about if you've ever cried when a famous person's died. And I've mentioned this a few times on here. I mentioned Rick Mail, and these people they looked at me like what are you talking about?
But that's what worries. Look, that is what worries me. Just to be serious for a sec, it just sounds like Simon, the eco warrior. Yeah. The worrying thing is, of course, that human beings never learn, do they? They don't have this stuff. If it's not there on the internet now, and appearing, so we've got a trade war with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. We've got people playing out the fascist playbook, and no one learns anything from history.
No.
Why do people not know? Why aren't people not versed in popular culture? If it's not on the internet 2 minutes ago, you don't know it. So there's all sorts of lessons that no one's learning because there's just this endless, turning over of ideas and images and stuff hitting you. So it's no wonder they don't know Rick May when they don't know great art and literature and they don't know all the lessons of human experience.
Yeah.
They're blinded by the latest tat they're being chucked at.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you. I think if it's not a trend on TikTok, they don't want to. How old do we sound right now? By the way,
well, I make no apology. For it. I mean, if you work in the arts, whatever, you're fairly open-minded to stuff.
Yeah.
If I was sitting here and I was some boring, I can't think what, and I'm talking about the kids and culture, I do like to think I know something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But just going back, 'cause I meant to mention this earlier on, going back to Rick Mail there, you
Yeah,
said you were only in Phoenix Nights for 3 minutes, and it's what everyone
yeah,
remembers.
yeah.
Lord Flashheart was only on screen for 2 minutes in
You're
that
kidding.
episode, that first episode of Blackadder he was in, and
Really?
he steals the episode, doesn't he? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you know you're
Absolutely.
in good company there.
Yeah, well,
It has to be said.
nice
Um,
one.
okay, so Alex, so we are coming towards the end of the interview,
Great.
and I've got the same few questions for you that I always ask everyone at the end,
Okay.
and they're all Grange Hill related.
Okay.
So over the last couple of years, there's been talk of a Grange Hill movie in the works.
Yes.
Phil Redmond's written it, and you know various people like Sarah Sugarman slated to direct it, and Kellen Jones is on board as one of the writers. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'd love to do it if anyone's listening.
Brilliant. I was going to ask, would we see a
Yes.
return of Simon, or
No,
indeed
someone
someone
else.
else?
Someone else. I'm too old to play an old eco warrior.
Brilliant. Okay. So you mentioned earlier on that you watched Grange Hill, you know, you would have loved to have been in it. So other than Simon, who was your favourite character in
Well,
Grange Hill?
well, Jonah is the one, really. I
Right.
really wanted that. He was kind of a bit swarthy, bit of a ladies' man. I
Yeah.
think that's what I'd like. Bit cheeky, little bit of a troublemaker. Was he was sort of him and Zamo, weren't they the
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
when they
yeah.
started? That's the one for me, Jonah.
Yeah, brilliant. And so that you would have liked to have played him as well if you
Yes.
couldn't. If you brilliant. Okay. So the final question then, Alex. I nearly called you Simon. Then apologies.
Right.
The final question, Alex, is why do you think there is still such affection for Grange Hill?
Well, I think it was a sort of reflection of a comprehensive school at the time.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it was. Okay, I mean, it was sort of exaggerated. Some of the stuff, there couldn't be an issue every single week. Yeah, most schools just tick along quite normally.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think people have affection for it because there were issues and there was stuff going on. And there was all the sort of jealousies and rivalries and loyalties of any comprehensive
Uh-huh.
school. But its heart was in the right place, wasn't
Yeah.
it? It was sort of people looked out for each other. Baddies had their comeuppance.
Yeah.
Good kids were recognised eventually for their
Yeah.
goodness. And although people could be nasty in it, they were never really nasty, were they?
Right. Yeah.
You never really saw blades, and you never really saw kids going through metal detectors to
Yeah.
check for guns or whatever
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so people have an affection for that because it was kind of like a lot of schools, and mine included. You did have your the spots knocked off you a little bit by going in there. It certainly wasn't a posh public school,
Yeah.
but you had the feeling that life was sort of going to be all right for everyone in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it was. And let's face it, my God, I'm so nostalgic about everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything. It must be my age, but for a lot of people, everything that reminds you of good, carefree times.
Yeah.
That's going to be the same for anyone looking back with rose-colored spectacles
Yeah.
after about the age of 25.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's it.
Oh, brilliant. Well, listen, Alex, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming on. It's been great talking to you and hearing about your experiences, your original attempt to get into Grange Hill,
Yes.
and your other bits, you know, while you were there and the industry and stuff like that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening, everyone. I hope
Oh,
that wasn't too tedious.
yeah, no, not at all. So brilliant. Thank you. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye bye.